We're in some really strange times at the moment with MPs coming out with previous convictions and thus stepping down, and other MPs going to prison, then not going to prison, then stepping down because they were sent to prison. And then we get other videos popping up online in social media, which might well be assault, which someone has sent it to me and said, is this assault? So I thought I'd bring our learned friend Alan Robertshaw on to have a chat about this, because this is really quite interesting. So first of all, if you're new to me, subscribe to my channel here. If you're new to Al, his channel is on the screen there, which I will pop up on screen here. You can see there, Al's got lots of sort of similar content to mine, only in Al's style, which is a lot more walk and talk, which is really nice. Much better scenery than I've got here. And so we're going to talk to you about this, because this is quite a hot thing now, isn't it, Al? We get lots of these videos, and MPs becoming, what did we just say? A little bit fisticuffs, a little bit handbags at dawn kind of thing. It's not really what we've seen MPs doing in years gone by, is it, Al?
No, I remember all the fuss when, what's his name, where he lifted the mace, Michael Heseltine, where he lifted the mace in the House and got into lots of trouble about that, because it was considered to be very undignified and not, in accordance with what we expect from our politicians. But yeah, it does seem there's certainly a new breed. I mean, we've not seen anything like this, I suppose, since the good old days of John Prescott. I mean, of course, he was a boxer in the merchant Navy, so at least he knew how to throw a punch. Yeah. I mean, I know it's the wrong take on this, but I'm very disappointed sometimes with the quality of people's stances. Come on, guys, it all comes from below the waist. What's going on?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, as a martial artist, I mean, I feel somewhat uniquely qualified as being both the martial. Well, you're a martial artist as well, Al, but we being martial artists and barristers, we can talk to you about not just the use of force as the martial artist, but legally speaking as well. Now, broadly, for self-defense, I've talked about this a lot of times before, it's got to be necessary, and then when you do use force, it's got to be proportionate in the circumstances that you genuinely believe them to be. And so many of those cases, it's either not necessary, or what the force used is just not proportionate. Mark Amesbury case in point, he kept hitting him when he was on the floor. That's clearly not proportionate, even if he was attacked, because the guy is on the floor and not giving any fight back. So it wouldn't have been proportionate anyway. But the really interesting one is this one here that I've just been sent. Now, as we understand it, this is not going anywhere. The police are not involved, not interested or anything else, so far as we understand it, right, Al?
That's as far as we can see, yes. I mean, the police were present. I think they were sort of maintaining a bit of a standoff. They were keeping their distance until it all started to look a little bit like it might be escalating, and then they stepped in. And they did the classic sort of you go your way, which I suspect solves like hundreds of these things every day, because if the police intervene in every little bit of argy-bargy, when tempers were flaring, they'd be completely overwhelmed. So I think sometimes they just, at the risk of doing one out, this reminds me, actually, I was once on the phone to a client. If you watch my channel, this is what happens. I just go off on tangents. But I was actually on the phone to my client. There was a row about who owned what in a sort of yard in London. And unfortunately, the police turned up because the other side had sent some surveyors. And unfortunately, my guy said, back in my day, you'd have got a shotgun for this. And it was like, I've explained on my videos before that how words can negate an assault. So I was on the phone with the police, and I said, yeah, but the fact that he said back in my day clearly meant that now times have moved on and he wouldn't do. And the officer, this was typical Metropolitan Police, just said, well, how about we'll tell the other lot to go away, you tell your guy to go away, and then maybe nobody has to get arrested. It's like, yeah, sounds like a plan.
And to be fair, that's what the police should be doing. And in cases like this one here we're about to play to you is exactly really what they should be doing. Stepping in, keeping the peace, preventing breach of the peace, and ideally preventing public order offences. And so there is a very specific point of law, because somebody did ask me, and I'm not going to say who, but somebody did ask me, would this count as assault? Now, we're going to talk very broadly and not make findings of fact in this case here, you understand, but we're going to say, very broadly speaking, what might apply in a situation exactly like this one, and we're going to play it. So let's get on with this, and let's play this to you first. It's only a minute or so long, and it'll give you a context. I'm going to play all of it because the the explanation here is that you need the full thing to get the full context of what I'm talking about. So let's play it and see, and then we'll talk about it.
You're a liar,
Anyway.
you're a cheat,
Anyway.
you're a coward, and you're a charlatan.
Anyway.
And the Reform Party, you kept
stop shouting.
rebad.
You're like a bully. You're like a bully.
No.
By the way, have you got a job yet?
I'm self-employed, I pay tax
No,
too.
mate, you're unemployed.
No.
You keep getting your words mixed up.
Self-employed.
It's unemployed.
Bima, follow me, loser.
It's, what you are, Steve, is you're a scrounger.
Am
you're a
I
parasite,
now? Oh,
and
yeah,
You're a drain
yeah.
on the public finance.
You're a
Well, you'll
coward.
be able
Are you
to prove
saying
that.
I'm on benefits?
You are a man of interest.
Are you saying
to
I'm
the
on
DWP.
benefits? Are you saying I'm on benefits?
Well, we don't know.
Man of interest, DWP. This
Anyway,
is an MP
why don't you get
lying
get
through
signed
his
up, signed
teeth.
up? Anyway.
Who votes
Nice
for
of it.
idiots like this?
Who
Who
for
votes
you?
for idiots
Who voted
like
for
you?
you? About 500 people.
How many parties have you been in, Lee? You just jumped ship
And we're
wherever it
done the party,
suits
isn't
you.
it? Guess what?
That's assault. Hands up.
You can't.
No, he went for me. Stay back.
And that's where the police step in. So a couple of things I would note here, first of all. The police doing exactly what they did. They're standing by. They knew it might kick off, to quote a phrase. They did what they're supposed to do. Now, there's a few observations I would make here. And Al, you can chip in and let me know what you think. Let viewers know what you think as well. I don't really agree with the way there was finger pointing here. This bit here is... to me, it's antagonistic. It's within the personal space, definitively. I mean, they're standing quite close together anyway, so it's already that kind of close standoff. But the finger pointing directly in somebody's face, I think this chap on the right did well to not really respond to that. If we look from about the first hand gesture here, 11 seconds, and it goes on pretty much for the full duration with the finger pointing. He does his own finger pointing, but it's much further away here. There is a hand to the back there. I don't think anyone's really going to be criticized for that. That's just more of a softer gesture, you would say, wouldn't it? But then obviously it comes to the crunch here when I think he tries, my interpretation there is he tries to knock the hat off and it didn't really work. So then he came back to try and do it again, but at which point he pushed him away. Now, I think the push was justified because obviously he'd tried to knock his hat off the first time, failed, went to try to do it again. So the guy was, well, I'm not having that, and pushed him away. It was no more than what seems to be necessary, and just pushed him off. Your thoughts, Al?
Yeah, I mean, just to talk about assault generally, when we talk about common assault is merely putting somebody in apprehension of the immediate use of unlawful force. You don't actually have to make contact. It just has to be something that is a threatening gesture. That can be enough for assault. However, also, we sometimes use the word battery. And while all batteries are assaults, not all assaults are battery, but battery is where there is contact. And for common assault, the contact can be completely minimal. And before anybody's ask us in the comments, would merely touching somebody's hat be assault? Yes, it would. There is authority on this, Crown and Thomas, 1985, which says that touching clothing can amount to an assault, even if the person didn't actually feel it. So clearly here, I think I'm fairly safe to say that just observing this, it is arguable, got to be very careful here, it is arguable that these actions could amount to assault. Not saying they could, so I am. But yeah, I mean, any non-consensual touching is assault. Now, people were saying, well, hang on a minute, people brush into me and tap me on the shoulder all the time, especially in busy places like London. We have this concept of implied consent. So say, for instance, you are on a crowded underground carriage and everybody's squashing in and, you've got your nose stuck in somebody's armpit, my happy days in London. Actually, I was quite tall, so I was usually the person with somebody stuck in my armpit. But in those situations, they say, well, look, yeah, that's just implied consent. The fact that you're getting on a busy tube train, you're accepting that people are going to jostle you and bump into you. And that's why it made it so hard to prosecute a lot of offences on the tube, where people were sort of rubbing up against people in a manner with perhaps ulterior motives. And that's why it's always so hard to prosecute these, because how do you show that, that is the mental state, that somebody's doing this for gratification or something like that? Because you can't just say, well, they're just touching me. If you were out and about in an open space and somebody came and just pressed against you, it would clearly be an assault. But, implied consent is things like, if you want to tap somebody on the shoulder to get their attention, it's been held that that's clearly not assault. Things like, those sorts of things. If somebody was falling over and you grabbed them before they fell into the road, that wouldn't be assault. I mean, even giving medical treatment, that is technically an assault. But again, if you come across an unconscious person and start doing CPR, the court's, very clear there that no, that's fine because the person would undoubtedly consent to being resuscitated. Although, interestingly, this has cropped up with a few of the assisted, I'm trying to think of a word that rhymes, assisted writing sort of things. If somebody's got a clear and settled thing going, no, I don't want you to assist me. And I used to do a bit of lecturing for medical people, especially paramedics, on this. So they say, what do we do if somebody's saying, no, leave me? I just want to be left. And the problem there is, it's like, well, what if that person's not of sound mind? You come across somebody in the street who's going, leave me, I'm fine. They've got a gaping head wound, and they go to treat them. And they say, I don't want to be treated, but, that's just because they're off their heads on something. I mean, I always used to advise, the courts are very generous, actually, to what we call rescuers. So even if somebody's saying, no, I don't want your help, leave me stuck in this river, or don't treat my head wound or something like that, courts have always said, look, if you're that settled that you want to shuffle off this mortal coil, you can do it next time. So that's the basics of assault. So, yeah, I mean, merely getting up and getting into somebody's face, having a row, that can amount to an assault. There's also, what if somebody was walking past, or a hypothetical person was walking past and thought, oh, that's a bit scary. I hope this doesn't spill over and I get involved. That would actually amount to a fray. So there's potentially, I mean, nobody's going to charge in a fray. I remember...
and just going back to your previous point, like this appears to be an example of the former, where there is no real problem with it. It's probably uninvited, it's probably unwanted, but it's just a tap on the back. So it's whilst it's technically probably unwanted, I don't think there's going to be much criticism of that. It's just a case of, now, come on, mate, let's move on, or whatever it was.
Yes. I mean, that sort of thing's fine. I just remember an old judge, though. I won't mention him, but he used to sit down at Southwark, and he had a double-barrel name. So I'm sure barristers of a certain age are going, I know exactly who you're talking about. But I remember he was just slamming his pen down and going, why was he even being prosecuted? He says, back in my day, people lost limbs in a phrase. It's from the Norman French, affray, to terrify. It's just like he was going, why is this being charged as an affray? He had a very old school attitude to, while he wasn't encouraging sort of violence on the streets, he was very much sort of, oh, can't you just basically give them both a good hiding and tell them to go on their way? I mean, obviously now that's different. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's not for, the police have a discretion not to arrest in every case, even if there is a complaint. So merely saying, I want to press charges, I want to do this. Well, the police don't owe you a duty of care, and they are under no obligation to actually do what you want. Similarly with prosecutions, I mean, it's always been said that there's no duty on the prosecuting authorities to prosecute, even in a case that passed the two-limb test, the realistic prospect of conviction in the public interest to prosecute. I mean, it's partly wrapped up with that in the public interest thing, but they can say, well, yeah, theoretically we could prosecute this and we don't want sort of like street violence, but at the end of the day, it's such a minor thing. We're going to use our resources in other
and that's what
areas.
We've probably got here, isn't it? Because if we were to look sensibly, this was a bit of a back and forth, a bit of a jostle. The guy in Lee's face knew that he was up in Lee's face and antagonizing him, and we don't know his motives, but someone in that position could have the motive to provoke somebody, and they could be hoping that they do that in front of the cameras. You can see the people. There's photographers in the background, obviously from the press, probably following him around, waiting for the opportunity to catch him in the act and doing something. Do we really want the police wasting time and prosecuting on things like this, which clearly no one was hurt, clearly nothing actually happened? It was a bit of a back and forth, and some might say, well, did he deserve it? Because if you're antagonizing somebody, well, on the one hand, to be balanced about this, on the one hand, we don't want to be encouraging politicians to be having this kind of exchange with people. Certainly not in the other case where they were punching them on the ground. But, we don't want to encourage that. But at the same time, do we want MPs that will actually stand up to people that are up in their face and say, well, not just going to be overly polite about this and actually give a little bit back. What do we want? Do we want MPs that have got that backbone, so to speak, to stand up to people? And where do you draw the line? I mean, I don't think we really want police wasting time with this, do we?
No, not at all. And there is the sort of, even though it's not a defence in law that somebody's asking for it, I mean, I remember sort of Buzz Aldrin hitting the moon landing conspiracy theorist because he was in his face and he'd been following him around and harassing him. And in the end, Buzz Aldrin just, and that was a really good punch. And, it was like, well, technically, yes, he had assaulted him, but I think the public opinion was very much, well, fair dues. And I think, like I say, in a case like this, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, the guy in the house, name I can never remember, he pushed him away. Now, that was a use of force, but that would arguably be very reasonable, necessary, and proportionate. Because the thing with self-defense is the use of force, or indeed defending another person by using force, it's a two-part test. There's a subjective element, which is, what did you think the threat was? And that counts. Even if you are wrong about what the threat is, the test is, it's what your honest belief is, even if it's a mistaken belief. This is for criminal law. And then the second limit of the test. Oops, sorry. But then the second limit.
You're not drunk, yeah.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Yeah, it has to be sort of, it wouldn't be a defence to say I was so off my head that I thought you were an alien attacking me or an axe murderer. There's a sort of an element of sort of objectivity in that. But But it is very much what your honest opinion is, what your honest belief is, even if you are mistaken. This is different for civil law. But then when it comes to the second part is facing that threat, whether it's real or not, what would be a reasonable response? And that's the objective test. It's not what do you think is a reasonable response. It's what would your average person. But reasonable force isn't synonymous with minimum force. You sometimes talk about this idea of the force ladder. If they've got a fist, well, you can up to a stick. If they've got a stick, you could pull a knife. If they've got a knife, you could pull a gun. That's sometimes used in American courts to sort of assess the proportionality. Over here, we don't really have that. I always say, though, when it's not what you do that gets you into bother with self-defense, it's what you say afterwards. So you need to be able to explain what you did it. And that invasion of personal space. Now, Dan, not giving your age away either, but you may remember Jeff Thompson and the fence. He was a bit of a self-defense, reality-based self-defense guru. And he was very much about how you could create this fence to protect your personal distance by putting your arms in a particular position. And he was very good, Jeff. I did some training with him. Doing hand gestures that looked like they were really innocuous and actually de-escalating, but they put you into very good positions if you really did need to kick off. And you could do something like, you sort of say, hey, just keep your distance, mate. And if they touch you, was like, look, I won't warn you again. If you touch me again, that is it. And then they touch you again. Then you have sort of put forward a justification because you've given them the warning. You've also explained what your rationale is for, one touch is a bit of a warning shot, but the second one, I am now fearing that I may, because you're perfectly entitled to use preemptive force as well. If arguably was that preemptive force? He pushed him away. I would say that was in response to the trying to grab the hat. And as we've said, grabbing clothing is an assault. So he was defending himself from an assault, arguably, hypothetically, make your own mind up, and pushing somebody away quite gently. That seems a reasonable and proportionate response. And I think the police have just looked at this and gone, you know what? It's like, we don't want to be having this discussion in the Westminster Magistrates Courts. Yeah. So, you know what? You go your way, you go your way. Because the police's main duty is to keep the peace. And that doesn't always necessitate, prosecuting and arresting people. So keeping the peace can be, you go your way, you go your way. Because at the end of the day, it's not like anybody was actually harmed here.
Yeah, indeed. So those are some thoughts. Generally, you understand, without drawing any firm conclusions. And it falls down on, what sort of MPs do we want? Do we want those that are going to stand their ground and stand up to what could arguably be described as nonsense in their face? Or, do we really want them reacting like that? I mean, again, that's a matter for you, but I'll try and find the link for it and link it below. You can watch it in full. You can form your own views. But those are some general views from Al and myself. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out Al's channel. I will pop it back on screen here so you've got time to go and look for it in the description. Loads of videos, taken after my commitment here, really, Al, just pumping out the videos and with lots of nice scenery in the background. So do go check it out, and I'm really pleased that it's growing. So check that out. Make sure you subscribe to both channels. Say again?
Sorry. It's mainly for the scenery and the dogs and me just rambling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Always for the dogs. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.